After her mother died, Miyo was treated as a servant by her father, her stepmom, and her stepsister, Kaya. No matter what she does, they always complain and laugh at her. Even though her life is bad, Miyo is always happy to see Kuji since he is the only one who is nice to her. Look, he even bought her a candy. Kuji is the son of Miyo's father's friend, and every time he comes, he always buys a gift for Miyo. Kuji is also secretly in love with her and determined to do anything to make Miyo happy. At night, while Miyo cleans the room, Kaya asks her father to buy a new kimono to wear to the girls' school since the new semester is starting. Wanting to make her daughter happy, her father allows her to buy a few new ones. Meanwhile, Miyo looks at them with a sad impression on her face. As Miyo is about to leave the room, her father stops her and asks her what she usually does during the day. She replies saying she cleans around the house. He then tells her to make sure she is here during the day after tomorrow. Miyo doesn't understand why he needs to tell her that since she is never allowed to go outside of the house anyway. The next day, Maya comes to the kitchen and asks her servants where her mother is. She wants to go out to buy a new kimono made for the new semester. There, she sees Miyo with dirt on her face. She then laughs at Miyo and tells her how terrible she looks right now. Before she leaves, she tells Miyo, don't she dare greet their guests looking like that because it will be an embarrassment to their family. Later, Kuji comes and meets with Miyo. Miyo asks him why he came here today. Kuji replies with a sad expression on his face saying there is kind of an important matter to discuss with her father before handing a box of sweets to Miyo as a gift. After he leaves to talk with Miyo's father for a while, one of the servants comes and tells Miyo her father is calling her. As she enters the house, Miyo immediately goes and checks on the mirror, making sure there is no dirt on her face. While walking, she thinks to herself that maybe Kuji came here to make a marriage offer, but she shouldn't get her hopes up, after all she is just a servant. After entering the room, her father immediately announced that he decided to let Kuji marry into his family and take over. The one who will become his bride and preserve his family is Kaya. Hearing this, Miyo lowered her head, trying her best to hold back her tears. Thinking, being treated like a servant as she is, she knew there was no way she could get married, as her life couldn't get any worse. Her father decided to let Miyo marry into the Kudou family. Kiyoka Kudou will be her husband. Knowing this, Kaya looks at Miyo and laughs, saying she will look forward to seeing how many days Miyo will last being his wife. After all, Kiyoka Kudou is rumored to be a cold and merciless man. Every fiancé has run away from him. Miyo tries to beg her father to change his mind, but he doesn't listen to her at all. He then tells her to gather all of her belongings and go to her husband's house tomorrow. It turns out, Kuji was forced to marry Kaya by his father since it was the only way to help Miyo out of her house. While Miyo saying goodbye to her mother's cherry tree stump that reminds her of her mother, Kuji comes and tells her he is sorry that he couldn't do anything to help her. Hearing this, Miyo tells him it is not for him to apologize because to her, she thinks it is just a bad luck. She doesn't blame or hate anyone since she has forgotten that feeling a long time ago. Kuji then tries to confess his feelings for her but is interrupted by Kaya. Kaya asks Kuji, what is he talking about? Kuji then looks down, saying it is nothing. After that, Miyo thanked Kuji for all of his kindness until now before going to her room to gather all of her belongings. By the way, this is all of her belongings. After her mother died, most of what her mother left for her has been thrown away. As she gathers her stuff, one of the servants comes in and gives her a new kimono. She tells Miyo that her father wanted her to wear it when she departs tomorrow. After that, she gives Miyo food to eat on her way tomorrow. The next day, before leaving, Miyo looks at her house one last time, thinking about how her life has changed after her mother died. After traveling for a while, Miyo finally arrives at her husband's house. There, she meets with a lovely lady named Yuri who works as a servant of the Kudou family. She then takes Miyo to meet with Kiyoka Kudou. Miyo is surprised to see how beautiful Kiyoka is. While Miyo is too stunned to speak, Kiyoka looks at her, thinking she is just another woman who wants to marry him because of his money. He then tries to anger her by telling her that while she is here, she must absolutely follow his orders no matter what, even if he tells her to die. To his surprise, Miyo isn't angry at all. Instead she asks him, is there anything else? She then tells him, she is looking forward to living here with him. After that, Yuri takes Miyo to the room she is prepared for her. Miyo is quite surprised to see all of the nice things in her room since she thought her husband would be more abusive or treat her with contempt. Yuri then tells Miyo that she is aware of the bad rumors about her young master, but she assures Miyo that her young master is actually a kind man. At night, while Miyo lying on the futons, she thinks that because she is from the Saimori family, Kiyoka probably thinks that she has a supernatural ability. She then has a flashback of when she was young. She and her sister, Kaya, were put in a room full of candles. Their father then released a demon to walk toward them. Among two of them, Kaya is the only one who is able to see it. As she's scared, her father happily comes and tells Kaya that she has spirit sight, which means she will gain supernatural abilities one day. From that day on, her father started to love Kaya even more and treat Miyo as a failure. The next day, Miyo woke up, feeling hungry. She then goes to the kitchen to make some food. After a while, Yuri comes. Yuri is impressed to see how good Miyo's cooking skill is. She then decides to leave the breakfast for Kiyoka up to Miyo. Unfortunately, as soon as Kiyoka knows the food was cooked by Miyo, he tells Miyo to try the food first. Hearing this, Miyo is confused. Before she can do anything, Kiyoka stands up and tells her he can't eat the food because he doesn't know what is inside. He thinks Miyo might put poison in it. As he leaves, Yuri tries to talk some sense to him, but it is pointless. Later, at the special anti-grotesquerie unit, Kiyoka and his subordinate, Yoshito, telling all of their newcomer units about the existence of grotesqueries, or we can call them demons, and the existence of supernatural abilities. Demons have been living in this nation since ancient times. They are harmful to humans, and the only thing that is able to fight the demon off is supernatural ability. As they talked, Kiyoka noticed that some of the guys didn't pay any attention at all. They whisper to each other, why train if they never encounter one anyway? Seeing this, Kiyoka shows one of his skills to them, scaring them. He then tells them that with the passage of time, the number of the demon have diminished. So now, they are rarely mobilized to eradicate them. That is why serious damage and confusion are assumed to occur from such incidents. Kiyoka expects his newcomer units to be ready to take the lead and fight the demon when the time comes. Later that day, in his office, Kiyoka can't get Miyo out of his mind. He keeps thinking about her and wonders why Yuri tries to defend her so much, since it is so rare for Yuri to defend someone to that extent. Elsewhere, Miyo's father tells Kuji to start preparing to enter his family. Even though Kuji was forced to marry Kaya, he still doesn't give up on Miyo. He wanted to be the one to save Miyo if she was thrown out of the Kudou family with nowhere to go. In the evening, Miyo bows down to Kiyoka and apologizes for what happened in the morning. She thinks she has overstepped her position. A man of his status couldn't possibly eat something prepared by one he doesn't trust. She then assures him that from today on everything will be prepared by Yuri. Hearing this, Kiyoka tries to comfort her in a weird way by saying it wasn't that he seriously suspected her. He just didn't feel like eating food prepared by a stranger. I think this guy is a tsundere. While eating, Kiyoka noticed that the food was cold. Seeing this, Miyo apologizes to him even though it wasn't her fault. He then tells her she doesn't have to apologize for that. It seems to him that Miyo keeps apologizing as if it is natural to do so. He then asks her why, but she is not answering him and keeps apologizing to him. Kiyoka then tells her, if she apologizes too much, it will lose its meaning. He continues to ask her, did she eat yet? Didn't Yuri make a meal for her too? She then replied saying she didn't have an appetite, so she told Yuri that she didn't need anything. He then asks her, is she not feeling well, but she tells him, it is nothing. When Kiyoka finishes eating, Miyo tells him she will get the bath ready for him, but he refuses. He tells her that he will do it himself. After all, it is easier if he uses his supernatural ability to heat up the water. Hearing this makes Miyo sad. She thinks that she is not useful for anything. Later, while Miyo cleaning the kitchen, Kiyoka comes to her and tells her he is sorry for not eating her breakfast. He then asks her to make him another breakfast tomorrow since Yuri will be a little late tomorrow morning. Hearing this makes her happy. He then tells her that the bath is still hot, so she should go in before it gets cold. Miyo thinks that Kiyoka gave her a chance to make up for her failure, so no matter what she can't mess it up tomorrow. The next day, Miyo has a nightmare of when she was young. One day, she comes to her room only to find her heirlooms and her cherry blossom kimono that her mother gave her went missing. Thinking, it must be her stepmom doing. Miyo then tells her servant that she will go and get them back. Her servant tries to stop her since there is no telling what her stepmom will do to her if she confronts her alone. Miyo then tells her servant, not to worry. If anything happens, she will tell her father. Little does she know, her father doesn't help her at all. After confronting her stepmom about it, her stepmom becomes angry and pushes her to the ground. Telling Miyo, how dare she accuse her of stealing. She then steps on Miyo's mother's comp with a smile on her face and then locks Miyo up inside the house. Telling Miyo to think about what she did and don't show her face until she is sorry. She doing all of that while Miyo's father watching silently. Miyo tries to beg her father for help but it is no use. Even Miyo's servant tries to beg them to let Miyo out but is fired after that. I want to punch them so badly. After waking up from her nightmare, Miyo wondering what her servant is doing now after she was fired that day. Miyo hopes she is happy and doing well. While making breakfast for Kiyoka, Miyo is surprised to see Yuri come early. She asks her, wasn't she supposed to be late today? Yuri doesn't know what Miyo talking about. After explaining everything to Yuri, Yuri laughs and tells her that Kiyoka is lying about that. It seems to her that he just wanted to eat Miyo's food. Miyo doubts that but she is not so sure of herself. After that, Yuri helps Miyo make the breakfast. After eating the breakfast, Kiyoka tells Miyo that the food is good. It tastes a little different from how Yuri made it, but it isn't bad. Hearing this makes Miyo so happy that she starts crying. After all, she forgot when was the last time she was praised or accepted by someone like this. Later that day, Kiyoka starts to question himself, wondering why a girl from a rich family like Miyo wears such rags that can't even be called old clothes and her body is so thin that she must have had a troubled life. After thinking for a while, he comes to the conclusion that maybe Miyo wasn't raised as a typical daughter from her family. He then asks Yuri, does she thinks Miyo would tell them if they asked her about it. Yuri thinks that it will be difficult. She then tells Kiyoka how unusual for him to be interested in his fiancée. Hearing this, Kiyoka tries to deny it but Yuri tells him that she thinks Miyo will be a fine wife for him and he should try to express his true feelings more if he wants Miyo to like him. Elsewhere, Kuji's father argues with Miyo's father. He tells Miyo's father, how dare he break the promise that he will give Miyo to his family. Kuji's father wants to have Miyo in his family because Miyo has the bloodline of the Yusuba family which is rumored to have the most broken ability. If you come this far, please consider liking and subscribing for more videos like this. Thank